Welcome to your daily dose of theological German. We are in installment number 9 of the excerpt from Ziefle's graded reader here from Adolf Schlatter's The Evangelist, John. His claim, his here being the Jew in the abstract sense, in the previous sentences, that's what Schlatter has been talking about, is kind of the relationship between the Jew, abstractly speaking, and humanity in general with respect to sinfulness and the way that John in his gospel is talking about it. So anyways, that's kind of the context. His claim to be elevated or exalted over humanity is denied. However, also no special depravity is laid as a burden upon him or on him. You're probably wondering, what happened to this S? I didn't translate it. So there's a few different things we're going to talk about with this sentence. So first I want to just address some issues about word order here, because we should always have a main clause and then whatever subordinate clauses will be in the sentence. What you actually have here are two main clauses, because this little semicolon is actually just dividing this up. So really you kind of have two sentences here. So that's going to be important to keep in mind. The other thing is, in a main clause, your verb should be in second position. And you might notice here that before you get to the semicolon, there is no verb in second position. Technically, it doesn't look to be the case anyways. Anyway, the first verb you get to here is this sein verb. And you might be going, well, yeah, that's at the end of a clause, clearly enough. So what happened? Shouldn't we have a verb? You know, this seems to be a subordinate clause, which it is. But then you have this other verbal construction right after it, and here you see that ist actually comes before a participle, which is at the end of this first half of the sentence, this first sentence, really. And so actually what that tells you is that this verb here, ist, is in the kind of conjugated second position for the overall sentence. Because if it wasn't, if this was also part of a subordinate clause, that should be at the end. With the participle preceding it. And so what's actually going on here is you start with your subject, his claim. You have a prepositional phrase which modifies the subject. And so because that phrase is a modifying phrase, it is a subordinate clause, and that's why this zu sein, this zu construction with the sein verb shows at the end. And so technically this here ist is in second position. It comes after the subject and the clause that modifies it. And so this is still a main clause kind of word order, which is why then the participle shows up at the end. So it's just kind of important to kind of pay attention to that and watch that. And then you have, again, like I said, this is technically a second clause here. And so your conjugated verb here is in second position. It's werden. And then you have down at the end a participle in order to make a passive construction. And that's typically how it works. You put a werden verb in the conjugated position in the main clause, and then the participle in the secondary position, which for the main clause here is at the end. And so, yeah, just pay attention to your German word order, and you'll hopefully steer clear of any serious problems. But it's kind of a convoluted sentence the way this is set up, and that often happens when you start getting prepositional phrases thrown in there. So it's really key to be able to also just notice the forms of words and know what's a participle and what's a conjugated verb, because that also just ultimately helps you translate the sentence regardless of where in the sentence they happen to show up. So the last thing I want to say here is that I didn't translate this S, and here's why. In German, if you are trying to, I don't know, make a sentence grammatically correctly, but you want to put the subject later on in the sentence than where it normally would show up, then sometimes you have to put a placeholder in the grammatical position of the subject in order to sort of syntactically facilitate that. So if you use April Wilson's textbook for your German reading, you will find in chapter 9, where she has a description of a variety of uses of S in German. She talks about this as the pay attention S, which I think is kind of hilarious as a grammatical label, but nevertheless, April Wilson has many of these kind of things because she likes to keep things lighthearted, I think, and trying to learn a language, which is good. But yes, so you don't have to translate this, because in English what you do, I mean, we don't necessarily do this in English, although sometimes we might say it is and sort of like reformat the sentence that way, but then you're kind of introducing another verb, and you have to do more things with the syntax. So sometimes it's just easier when you're translating in English to just actually put the subject back where it needs to be and just leave that pronoun untranslated, which is how I did it there. The only other thing to mention is just really quickly, I did translate with a preposition this object, which is a pronoun, and it is dative. And so when this verb here, legen, takes, and that is what that is, by the way. If you look this up in the dictionary, it's legen, and so you know it's a participle because of this ge prefix, and you put that together with werden up here and get your passive construction. So it's got a dative object though, and so in English, sometimes when a verb like this takes a dative object, you actually need a preposition, because it could take an accusative object if the thing that you are actually laying, right, is what the object of the verb is, then it would be accusative. So if you're going to lay a blanket on somebody, for instance, the blanket would be accusative. So this dative object, in English, you need the preposition on in order for it to kind of make sense. So let's go ahead and go back and actually just translate this whole sentence again, now that we've looked at all of these variety of things, because we've kind of forgotten what it says, and we can just kind of read it out with better context. So his claim to be over humanity exalted, well, that was unnecessarily wooden. His claim to be exalted over humanity is denied. However, no special burden is laid, no special depravity is laid as a burden on him. So there you go. I hope you found that helpful. As always, please like and subscribe and share, and you know, whatever you got to do, whatever you feel like doing with these videos, watch them multiple times. The more views, the better it is. Then YouTube will tell more people about it, and it's all about trying to get YouTube to care. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow.